Okay. I guess we don't have anything else scheduled at 11:30, so we can remember that if we need to. So yesterday, we looked at some language that you brought, David, on H81.
Yes.
And what we're going to see this morning is we're not going to cover any new ground. We're going to look again at that language. I asked David to clean it up a little bit. I think there were a couple of words that were the wrong words, and then where he had given us two options, option A and option B, we've removed option 1 and 2. I can't remember which it was. We removed the first of those, so it just has the second one that has hopefully made things a little clearer on the costs and terms piece. So why don't we go through, we've got it up on the screen there. David, you want to just introduce yourself and walk us through what you've got?
Absolutely.
And is it okay to take questions as we're going?
However you guys want to do it.
All right, good.
All right. David Hall, Legislative Council, H81. What's on the screen and what we're working from is a draft of 5.1 of a committee strike all amendment. I did advance the draft number just because it's, things are now sort of reorganized and put in their proper place. All of the amendments are updated. The words that the chair alluded to were the difference between owner and consumer, which are now consistently throughout the bill. The word is owner because it's a defined term, the way that this draft is structured. Not everybody was here yesterday, but this basically reflects or crystallizes the two pieces we saw yesterday. So those are the change to the definition in trade secret, and then also the so-called option B, which is essentially the fair and reasonable terms, not the fair and reasonable terms approach, but rather substantially the same conditions, terms, costs as when we're comparing, what do you provide to an authorized repair provider versus what do you provide an owner or an independent repair provider. So there's only a little bit of highlighting in here just to flag those places. 4051 still definitions. I have 4 highlighted for 2 reasons. This used to be the definition where fair and reasonable terms was. And again, if we are taking that out of the definitions and sort of threading that as a substantive series of requirements that govern the duty to provide parts, tools, and documentation down below. And the second reason is I just want to make sure you've landed on a place on the definition of forestry equipment that you are comfortable with. We had talked about this several meetings ago, tried to tweak it to make sure we're capturing the right universe. So we've still got non-divisible equipment, implements, accessories, and contrivances. I did not realize that a contrivance actually means it's on a track or a tread. So I was going to strike that word, and then I decided to do some digging. It's a good word. It's good to be here. That is a contrivance. I'm going to tell my brother-in-law that he has several contrivances floating around Sugar Shack today. Used directly and principally in harvesting timber or for on-site processing of wood forest products, including the equipment used to construct, maintain, install infrastructure necessary to and associated with the logging operation. So with those changes that you decided on, everybody good with that definition?
Like it.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. All right. These are all the same. And then, we sort of scratched the surface on this yesterday. I'm happy to talk about this more to the extent you want to. The definition here of trade secret, you will recall originally it incorporated by a reference 9 VSA 4601, and that is the substance of A here. So again, information, including formula, pattern, compilation, program, device, method, technique, or process that derives independent economic value, actual or potential, from not being generally known to, not being readily ascertainable by proper means by other persons who can obtain the economic value from its disclosure or use, and is the subject of efforts that are reasonable under the circumstances to maintain its secrecy. So I had said at one point that this, I wasn't sure if this might include a tool, and it would not include a tool itself. It could include the design of a tool. Now, they would have to be secret and blah, blah, blah. You'd have to maintain its secrecy and have reasonable value back, investment back expectations for its value. But a trade secret is intellectual property, right? And we discussed yesterday how that is a property right in its own. And, property rights carry with them the bundle of rights. And one of those is the right to exclude others. So generally we try to protect that. But again, part of your reasonable investment back expectation of having and maintaining this property right, of not extinguishing that right, is that you do maintain its secrecy and its exclusivity. So we are saying in B here that for purposes of this chapter, we are not creating, or we're not anticipating, a state law property right as a trade secret in a part, tool, or documentation that is necessary to perform diagnosis, maintenance, or repair, and that it sells or otherwise makes available to an authorized repair provider for that purpose. So again, it wants to set up on the same plane. What do you make available to the authorized versus what you are required to make available to the independents and owners? And it says, puts the world on notice to say, for purposes of this chapter, there's no reasonable investment back expectation that some component of this will be maintained secret if it's necessary to do the repairs. Any questions on that?
I know not everyone was here yesterday when we talked about this, so. Okay. Bradley.
So one thing I can see, I can vision in this trade secret part is like guidance equipment. I mean, they usually have a trademark on them. Would that be something we're talking about there?
Well, so a trademark is a different kind of protection for intellectual property than for a trade secret. So trademarks generally govern more at the federal level, and a trademark or a service mark could be the proprietary and intellectual property of the manufacturer. This would not allow, and it doesn't really address the use of a trademark. So just because you were able to receive the, tools, parts, documentation from the manufacturer, it wouldn't give you an independent right to use their trademarks. You couldn't suddenly start using, the John Deere brand just because it would not set up that relationship. And this wouldn't govern that either. It's a good question though, because there is obviously value in those marks as such as property.
Okay, let's then go on to the next section.
All right. So again, 4052 here is a combination of both the duty and then the scope of the duty. So if the duty is to provide parts, tools, and documentation, the next question is, what is the scope? On what basis do you have to fulfill that duty? And we had previously done this by having a section of law that says your duty is give this stuff to these people on fair and reasonable terms. Up above, we had defined fair and reasonable terms to mean what it means in the context each of parts, tools, documentation. 4052 written anew here puts the duty in A, and it says basically substantially the same terms as you make this stuff available to the authorized providers. And then there are modifications or limitations that put shape on what that means in the context of terms in B, costs in C. And I did bump up, there had been a D yesterday that related to the security devices. I've actually bumped that up into A2 here because it's really part of the same duty to provide whatever parts, tools, documentation are necessary to perform the repair, diagnosis, maintenance, repair services. So if that includes a security lock feature, then we'll address that in 2 here and say, if it includes an electronic security lock or security related function that has to be unlocked or disabled for diagnosis, maintenance, or repair, the OEM shall make that available to the independent or provider or owner, whatever tools, parts, documentation necessary to unlock, disable the function, reset the lock after the diagnosis is complete. So again, A1, state the duty. OEM shall offer for sale or otherwise provide to the independents or the owners parts, tools, documentation that you provide or make available to an authorized repair provider, subject to B, on substantially the same terms, subject to C, substantially the same cost. 2 is the security lock. 3 is the bit we saw yesterday where we say you can fulfill this duty directly, you can fulfill this duty through an intermediary authorized repair provider if you two have agreed that that is something that the authorized will do. Now that was bracketed yesterday. I've taken the brackets out here, so now is the time for you to object if you don't want to have that modifier in lines 13 to 14.
Representative Graham.
So if I was to go to a dealer and want a certain part, like equipment, the dealer has to sell it at no profit. I mean, would have to sell it at the same price the manufacturer sold it to them.
No. It's the right question, but the duty again flows to the manufacturer, not to the authorized repair provider. So if you go to Champlain Valley Equipment, you can't just walk in the door and say, under this law, you have to sell me, a replacement part for my baler. Instead, the owner goes to the manufacturer and says, under this law, I have the right to buy this part. Are you going to sell it to me? Or can I go to your repair provider? And it will be between the manufacturer and their franchisee to work out whether or not those parts, those tools, those documents would flow through the franchisee or not. If they currently have an agreement in force that says or doesn't say anything about this, then that's going to be negotiated by them. If they have an agreement that prohibits the dealer has said, I don't want to have to sell this to anybody else, let's memorialize that in our franchise agreement. This law is not going to upset that franchise agreement, and the duty flows just to the manufacturer. So this opens the possibility that they could negotiate something where, the dealer, the franchise dealer, the authorized dealer agrees that they will be the intermediary or the conduit to fulfill the manufacturer's obligation. It does not obligate the authorized repair provider to be the intermediary. Is that clear to everybody?
It's clear, but I think it's going to drive dealerships out of the state. I think this whole thing is going to make it harder and worse on farmers than if we just. I can see the diagnostic part of it. When you start getting into the parts and stuff, I think it's going to kill the dealership.
Representative Fleming.
Ronnie, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the tractor manufacturers are going to say, yes, go ahead and sell it. And this is the price you can sell it at. And there's going to be a bump up in price because I think they're going to be losing money. I don't think they want to lose their dealers on the ground here. And I think they're going to work within the law to say, okay, fine, you want to buy this part, you can buy it from your dealer, but this is how much it's going to cost. I can't see them saying, we're just going to close up shop on the dealers.
So, the law is written, my understanding would be that the manufacturer would have to sell it at the same price, whether it's to the dealer or to the customer, correct?
That is
That
not
works.
what he just said.
I think we have to keep reading to get to the terms, right? We have general principle, substantially the same terms, substantially the same costs, right? But then as we move down through B and C, that there's room for modification in there, right? So let's look at the whole section together, and then I think this is the right conversation to have for you as policymakers. Just on B here. So what does it mean to sell in substantially the same terms? That by design, that does not mean identical. If it's said, it has to be substantially the same, but it does not have to be identical. And that's an intentional choice, and that's something you could change. I mean, you could make it be the exact same terms, but I don't think that would work very well. Terms here, limitations. Under the terms governing the sale or provision of parts, tools, and documentation, an OEM shall not impose on an independent repair provider or owner. So substantial obligation to use or restriction on the use of parts, tools, documentation to diagnose, maintain, repair the equipment. That includes conditions that the independent or the owner become an authorized repair provider, or any requirement that the part, tool, documentation be registered, paired with, or approved by the OEM or an authorized repair provider before it will work. So no sort of outsized burdens, conditions, or preconditions on what would otherwise normally be this, transfer of equipment that should work upon transfer. Second, they shall not impose an additional cost or burden that is not reasonably necessary or is designed to be an impediment on the independent or owner. Shall not impose an additional burden or material change that adversely affects the timeliness or method of delivering parts, tools, or documentation. So can't say, yeah, I'll sell you the part, you're going to get it in 6 months. That wouldn't work. So costs. So we have a 1 and a 2, and 1 is the general, 2 is the modifier, right? So subject to 2, 1 says the OEM shall offer for sale or otherwise make available parts, tools, and documentation to an independent repair provider or an owner at a cost that is fair to both of the parties, considering the agreed upon conditions, promised quality, and timeliness of delivery, and B, that includes any discount, rebate, or other financial incentive offered to an authorized repair provider in the original equipment manufacturer's normal course of business. That is further modified into an OEM may impose an additional charge for parts, tools, or documentation if and to the extent to which, only to the extent to which the manufacturer incurs additional costs to make parts, tools, and documentation available for sale or otherwise available to an independent repair provider or owner, or B, the parties agree to a material change in costs or terms concerning the sale or provision of the parts, tools, documentation, and agree to an additional charge that is reasonably related to the additional costs arising from the material change. So I would say the intent underlying all of this in the language, I hope, reflects that it is no longer the case that, for instance, tools have to be at the lowest possible cost that you would otherwise make it available to any other authorized repair provider. Rather, for all 3 buckets, it is supposed to be substantially the same terms, but there has to be some room for negotiation based on the reality of different costs or the reality of negotiating, sort of a different arrangement than what you might otherwise have with your authorized repair provider. It has to be, good faith. The costs, additional costs would have to be reasonably related. You still can't impose additional material burdens on the transaction. So it's not the same construct as the fair and reasonable, but it's also not just a duty to sell the thing and then no further restriction on what that duty entails. It's maybe more of a middle ground that applies across the board to all things, parts, tools, documentation.
Questions? Right, have we reached we haven't reached the end of the bill, and I know that good.
Yeah. So the enforcement piece is unchanged. The application and limits, I just corrected the internal cross-reference here. So that's just a technical fix, and then it's effective in July.
Representative Templeman.
I just want to get a little clarification here, just organizational things. So we were talking about language B and all of that's included in what we're reviewing right now. That's correct? Other than this headshake here. Yeah.
Yeah, the B is what was put, yesterday's option B is what has been inserted into this.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Other questions? So down at the very, very bottom, the dates were effective date July 1. Yesterday when we looked at that, I think, or you had raised a question, everybody good with this date? All right. Gee. So I think, as far as like markup and language goes, I think we're at a pretty good spot here, it feels like. And we can fill John in later on. But you're back successfully?
I'm back successfully,
Okay.
so I should email Nigel the amended amendment right now,
Yes,
right?
yeah, good.
Have we gotten it yet? Haven't checked.
Yeah, we did get it. Well, we have David Hall here. Any other questions for him? We can continue the conversation, but any other questions about what we just walked through? Okay, well, John.
I had some from yesterday, but I'm out of contacts with maybe, so I can do it
So,
offline. Whatever.
yeah, why don't we do it offline? I mean, I'll just say that we took option 2 or option B from yesterday and plugged it in, which I'll, just say for my own self is that I feel it's cleaner. I mean, I think it's a lot cleaner. I think not having the fair and reasonable and the possible ambiguity there, despite your best efforts originally to define that, I feel is maybe a plus. So I thank you, David, for the work you've done on it.
Sure, my pleasure.
And I think including the definition of trade secret, which originally was just a reference to statute, actually plugging that in, I think it helps as well. Representative Wilson.
I have a press conference to go to. Is that all right to leave?
Sure, yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, then why don't we, we'll excuse David. Just before we shut down here, we just go around the room. I know there was suggestion yesterday that maybe we'd want to hear more testimony. So I'm going to just go around and poll folks on that question, whether you are feeling like there's somebody else that we really need to hear from before you would feel comfortable voting. And just bearing in mind that it's probably two different dynamics. One is you can feel like, we've been working on something for a long time, ready to move. Another can be, there's perhaps always somebody else out there who has a perspective that we haven't heard from yet or that might be helpful. So just a question again, how, and I should have gotten Charles. How are you feeling about I really feel we need to take some more testimony, or no, I'm good. I'll start. Yeah.
Sure. I am feeling satisfied with the amount of testimony and the diversity of folks we've heard from in order to make an informed decision for my vote.
Okay, and I'll go next to Representative Graham. Ask the same question. Are you feeling like there's somebody else you want to hear from, or you're good enough at this point, one way or the other, to vote, whatever that way is?
You've heard from all sides. And logged in. Wood sector, ag sector, heard both sides of the story, both sides of what they want.
Okay.
I don't know what more you can ask for.
Right. We'll just go around the table clockwise then, Representative. Roll.
Yes, I agree.
You agree? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Representative O'Brien?
Can you just pass?
Sure, yes, yeah.
I'm feeling comfortable with what we've heard.
Okay.
Me too. I'm good. I went back through last night and looked at just to make sure we heard from enough dealers, and we did. And I reread testimony, so I feel fine with that.
Okay.
I'm satisfied as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good, and I guess the only thing I would add is unless there's somebody that's beating down our door that really wants to testify that hasn't, but I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't think there is. I should point out, and maybe you're all looking at our web page every day. We continue to get written testimony from various parties. And yesterday there was a document that was not addressed to us, to the committee. It's a number of states, attorney generals who weighed in on this concept in general, had written a letter supporting it. So that was provided to us. So that's posted. So anyway, feel free to check there because people have weighed in with written testimony too, that we might not have heard from. Representative Lipsky, any thoughts on this question?
For one, I failed to know that we had a web page that people checked in on.
You do know that. It's our committee page.
Oh, all right. With that said, I still feel I've been drowning in more than adequate testimony, so I'm ready to go.
All right.
Good dear.
Okay.
I'm the self-confessed idiot.
All right.
So, I mean, I feel that I would like to hear more about that relationship between John Deere and the authorized dealers as far as do they own, do the dealers buy these tools? Is it a lease thing? Are they free? How does training work? Just that I don't understand that anyway. And does it vary dealership to dealership, to OEM to OEM? And then I just had some more sort of legal questions, not so much listening to more farmers or loggers or the authorized dealers, but just sort of the unintended consequences potentially of legal challenges. And I'm, maybe those are some of my David Hall questions.
Okay. Yeah. And you can maybe talk to David.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're not ready to vote until you get answers to those questions?
I would prefer to,
Okay.
to hear some of that.
Okay.
There was some written testimony from dealers about this.
And what did they say? What were they?
Well, they claimed that they have to buy the
They have to buy it.
equipment, I well, you know, and then they have to pay to send people out to get trained.
That's on them too. Okay, so I should look for that, Rodney.
I think we did hear that if they buy, it's not, you
A
know,
lease or
a lease or a consignment.
Right.
If you sell it, you know, then, you know, they have to buy it.
For clarification, they buy it, but do they buy upgrades as upgrades pop up as well?
The dealers,
Yeah.
I would think they'd have to, or they can't fix anything.
The question is, do they buy them, or if they're upgrades, they are passed on?
Are they, is there a charge? when-
Correct.
yeah. Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't know. It might be in the testimony that we received, yeah. Okay, so then, good. I think that's just helpful to know. I appreciate everyone's perspective on that. And I know, John, you're multitasking, so we should let you make sure you're doing that other thing that has to get done. Yes, Representative
Just
Lipsey.
a comment. We've heard a lot of testimony, and it all seems to focus on these when the screen goes black, and I'm a living survivor of that. Although I've survived, my life's much leaner because of the losses I incurred having to just liquidate equipment. These problems have emerged in modern times, and there are sectors, we've heard it from forestry, we've heard it from agri, we've heard it from grain, across the board, rapid access to some diagnostics and specifically can be a matter of possibly profitable versus definite loss. So in our role as sort of advocating for the consumer and the small business, I've made up my mind on this one. On those grounds alone, I tend not to move forward out of pure fear, as in fear of litigation. I feel there's been compelling testimony that there are a lot of small, obscure businesses that could benefit from having access to this stuff. I don't feel that we're asking anybody to do something for free. And there's a side of me, and I've said this, that I depend on dealerships, whether they're in state or wherever. And I want to say that a lot of dealerships have been incredibly supportive. So I don't feel that we're going to, I really appreciate Rodney's concern about the impact of fair access. I think it would be tragic if we lost state dealerships. I don't sense that that's going to be a result of this fair access to work. So I'm ready. My comment.
Well, just to be clear, we're not going to vote right now. I'm sure that.
Well, then I
yeah, but I
reserve
appreciate
the right to change
I suppose that's always the case.
or not be.
We didn't schedule a vote, so we really
Okay.
shouldn't be, rushing. I mean,
My apologies.
rushing's not the right word. We shouldn't be doing,
We'd never be accused of rushing on this.
or on anything. Yeah. Representative Graham.
Is this going to be a committee bill, or are we going to attach it to Senate House?
I think it's going to go I'm not sure that we can attach it to Senate housekeeping from a I'm not sure there's a common theme there. So I think it's going to be not a committee. I mean, I think it's going to be just as it is, this bill. So you're thinking, what about crossover and the fact that it didn't make crossover? Yeah. I think we're just going to have it go as is. And Senate will take it up if they decide that they want to take it up.
So in that case, Senate has from when they receive it all the way to the end of the biennium to potentially work on it.
Yeah.
It doesn't die this year if they don't.
No,
right?
yeah. Okay, well, since we didn't have a long lunch yesterday, if we want, we can move off of this subject, but maybe actually before we leave, since we do have everybody here, we heard some testimony this morning on the bill that Henry introduced, sort of cut short the conversation there. So wanted to see if anybody had thoughts on that. You missed that.
No, I listened.
You
I
listened.
just couldn't figure out how to talk. Probably a blessing, but I like the bill. I feel like, what did I say? There was something, I felt like, hang on, I can't find it. I felt like there was one way to do it that felt much more onerous and one way to do it that felt less onerous. And I feel like we should do, I can't find the phrasing, hang on.
This is the ed bill.
Yeah, the education thing. There was something that Beth St. James was talking about that was, the course of study is the hardest option. I like the bill and I feel like I felt like we sort of got mired in higher level classes rather than like elementary, which I thought, I always thought we'd start with elementary and then kind of work our way up in difficulty and complexity. Then in high school, get to your point of let's talk about agriculture and its environmental impacts. But I liked it. I thought it was a really interesting discussion. It seems harder to do than we thought.
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway was, oh, people aren't going to like this. But then it isn't interesting if we could sort of find out quickly how many school districts are already teaching about agriculture and nutrition in a way that we don't even know about.
And how do they do it?
And maybe only some districts need to add to their curriculum for this. And I did like, I forget who said it. This doesn't have to just live in the natural sciences world. This could live in math. It could even live in English because there are lots of books about farming. It could even live if there's a filmmaking class or a great history. Oh my God, yeah. So I feel like there's a lot of potential, but I also feel like there's a lot of navigating that we would need to do.
John?
Just on Josie's point there, maybe I missed it, but was it really just high school curriculums we were looking at there? Like all those sort of requirements, like financial literacy, obviously isn't for second graders. So is there a, do they split out elementary, middle school and high school curriculums? I didn't hear that. And
So that was on the board's, is it the education quality standards or? I think maybe that was that document that she put up that wasn't statute. Is that what you were looking at or?
Just how curriculum requirements change from elementary to middle school to high school.
Yeah.
Clearly, like you're saying, elementary has to be far simpler. I mean, they might be the same concepts like numbers and communication, language, things like that are touched at those lower levels, but obviously not financial literacy or trigonometry, right? Yeah.
So, yeah, great. I mean, I think we all need to better we would all need to better understand that along with several other things. But one thing that I think sort of emerged today was that it seems like there's not a lot in statute that's very specific about what has to happen in schools, that broadly speaking, the legislature has said the State Board of Education will come up with standards, and then it's actually the districts or the supervisory unions that are responsible for the curriculum to meet the standards. So it would be a bit of a departure, although as Beth was pointing out, doesn't mean that, the legislature can't start to be more precise or specific on what happens. So, but I think that just sort of recognizing that's sort of the reality that we, the current environment is helpful. And I just want to say that, I think this would be great to delve into. I want to be sure the committee doesn't feel like, this feels like it's work that, maybe the education committee should be doing before we launch into it. So, but I'm excited about it if other folks are.
Yeah, I'm excited. I don't think we should just slough it off to the education committee because I think, we probably know more about farming than they do.
Yes.
So, especially the guy who wrote it. So.
Yeah. So, okay, good. Then if there's a general sense that we want to delve further, I think the next step would be to better have in somebody from the board and somebody from the Superintendent's Association, just make sure that we are clear on how the system currently works. And then if we want to think more about what exactly we hope would be the result of our work, how can we best accomplish that to actually make it so that at the end of the day, this is happening in the classroom, and how much, how can we make that work to the extent that we can? Does that sound like sort of a summary of where people's thoughts were at the end of that session? Okay, good.
All right.
Yes.